The wind howled across the barren desert, carrying with it sharp grains of sand that stung the skin like needles. The twin suns hung low in the sky, casting a dim golden light over the endless wasteland. A small figure moved slowly through the haze, her steps uneven, her breath shallow. It was a girl, not more than 15 in human years. Her thin frame wrapped in torn fabric that barely shielded her from the storm. Her silver hair was tangled with dust, her skin pale and dry. Her eyes dull from exhaustion, she clutched something close to her chest, a small metal pendant, cracked. Down the middle, every few steps, she stumbled, falling to her knees before forcing herself to rise again in the distance. The faint shape of a derelict cargo station appeared through the swirling sand. The settlement was not a place of kindness. Rusty structures leaned against each other like tired old bones. Alien traders moved quickly between shelters, avoiding the storm. When the girl staggered into the station's edge, eyes turned toward her, but no one came forward. "She's cursed," someone whispered from the shadows. Another voice, rough and cold, muttered, "That one brings trouble." The girl's vision blurred, her legs finally giving way as she fell onto the cracked metal ground. She tried to speak, but only a weak sound escaped her lips. From the far end of the station, a tall human man stepped out of a scrap dealer's shop. His name was Evan Cross, a scavenger who lived on the edge of nowhere. He was searching for old ship parts when the sight of the collapsed figure caught his attention. He paused, narrowing his eyes against the blowing sand. Something about the way she lay there, too still, too fragile, made him step closer. The other traders gave him strange looks, as if warning him to stay away, but Evan ignored them. Kneeling beside the girl, her breathing was shallow, her hands trembling as they gripped the broken pendant tighter. "Hey," he said softly, his voice almost lost to the wind. "Can you hear me?" Her lips moved, forming two faint words. "Help, please." Evan felt a tight knot in his chest. It had been a long time since anyone had asked him for help. He glanced around, expecting someone, anyone, to come forward. But all he saw were eyes watching from a safe distance, none willing to step closer. The girl tried to push herself away from him, as if unsure whether he was friend or foe. Evan raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "You're safe," he said, though he wasn't sure if that was true. The storm's wind howled louder, the sky darkening with an incoming front. If she stayed here, she wouldn't last another hour. Evan hesitated for only a second before lifting her into his arms. The girl was lighter than he expected, like carrying nothing more than a bundle of rags. Her head rested weakly against his chest. The metal pendant slipped slightly from her fingers. Catching the dim light, it had strange markings, old and half-earsed. He began walking toward the outer edge of the station, ignoring the murmurs behind him. "Leave her," a voice called. "She's not worth the trouble." Evan didn't even look back. He had lived long enough to know when a crowd's fear was stronger than their compassion. As he reached his small ship parked beyond the last storage shed, he felt her stir slightly. Her voice was barely a whisper. Don't take me back." Evan frowned. "Back where?" But she didn't answer, her eyes closing again. The ramp to his ship lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. Inside, the warm air hit them, carrying the faint smell of engine oil and metal. Evan laid her gently on a padded bench near the maintenance bay. He found a blanket in a storage locker and wrapped it around her shaking shoulders. She opened her eyes for a moment, watching him warily. "What's your name?" he asked. After a pause, she murmured, "Leora." It was a soft, almost musical name, yet heavy with sadness. Evan fetched a cup of warm water from the galley and held it out to her. Her fingers trembled as she took it, sipping slowly. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. Then, she set the cup down and looked at him, her gaze sharper than before. "They'll come for me," she said, her voice slow but certain. Evan studied her face, seeing a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Who?" he asked. "Hunters," she whispered. "If you keep me, you'll be in danger." He leaned back slightly, considering her words. Danger wasn't new to him, but this felt different. Still, he couldn't just throw her back into the storm. "Rest," he said finally. "We'll figure it out when you're stronger." Leora lay back against the bench, closing her eyes. Outside, the wind howled against the ship's hull, and far away, in the desert's shifting haze, the faint hum of engines began to grow louder. The storm outside was growing worse. The sound of sand and wind slamming against the hull like endless waves. Evan secured the outer hatch, locking out the desert inside the ship. The dim lights flickered for a moment before stabilizing. The air was warmer here, but the tension in the room was still sharp. Leora sat where he had placed her, the blanket wrapped tightly around her small frame. Her eyes followed every move he made, as if unsure whether to trust him. Evan moved with a slow, careful rhythm, not wanting to startle her. He poured more warm water and set it near her, but she didn't reach for it. "You need food, Evan," said, his voice steady but gentle. He opened a storage bin and pulled out a sealed pack of nutrient bread. It wasn't much, but it would keep her alive. Leora didn't move, her fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. "Eat," he said again, sliding the packet closer. Still, she only shook her head, her silver hair shifting slightly under the dim light. Evan sighed quietly, realizing this wasn't simple hunger, it was fear. She wasn't refusing the food, she was refusing to accept help. He sat down on the bench across from her, leaning his elbows on his knees. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said slowly. For a long moment, she stared at the floor, her lips pressing into a thin line. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, "Why?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked. Her eyes lifted to meet his, and for the first time he saw the depth of her exhaustion. "No one helps someone like me," she said. "Not without wanting something." Evan didn't answer right away. He had heard words like that before, from people who had been betrayed too many times. The hum of the ship's engines filled the silence between them. Finally, he said, "Maybe I'm just not like the others." Leora's gaze flickered, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. She glanced toward the door, her body tensing. Evan followed her eyes and heard it too, the faint, distant sound of approaching engines. The noise was muffled by the storm, but it was there, growing louder. "They found me," she said, her voice trembling. Evan stood up instantly, his instincts sharp. "Who?" he asked again, but this time her answer came without hesitation. "The hunters." Without wasting time, Evan moved toward the ship's lower compartment. "Come on," he said, motioning for her to follow. She hesitated for a second, then rose unsteadily to her feet. Her steps were slow, but she followed him down the narrow corridor. He led her into the maintenance bay, past rows of old tools and spare parts. In the corner was a storage compartment, disguised as a wall panel. Evan slid it open to reveal a small, cramped space just big enough for a person. "You'll be safe here," he said. Leora's eyes darted to the small gap. "It's dark," she whispered. "I know," Evan replied, "but it's better than being out there when they come inside." After a long pause, she stepped into the hiding space. Clutching her pendant tightly, Evan closed the panel, leaving just enough air to pass through the vents. Then he returned to the upper deck. The noise outside was louder now. The hunters had landed. The hull vibrated slightly as heavy footsteps approached. A loud knock shook the door, followed by a voice, cold and commanding. "This is an official search," the voice said. "We are looking for a runaway, a silver-haired female. Property of the Varkon Syndicate." Evan opened the hatch slowly, keeping his expression calm. Two tall, armored aliens stood in the doorway, their glowing visors scanning the interior. We received a report she was seen here. The first?" Hunter said. Evan shrugged casually. "I've been alone all day." The second hunter's gaze swept across the room, pausing near the lower compartments. Evan's pulse quickened, but his face remained still. One of the hunters stepped inside. The other stayed at the door, keeping his weapon in hand. The hunter inside glanced down and noticed something small on the floor, a shard of metal. It was part of Leora's broken pendant. Evan's mind raced. Before the hunter could bend down to pick it up, the ship's lights flickered violently. "Reactor issue," Evan said quickly, his voice calm but urgent. "If it overloads, this place will blow." The hunters exchanged a glance. Clearly unwilling to risk it. "We'll be watching you, human." One of them said as they stepped back outside. The door closed, and their footsteps faded into the storm. Evan exhaled slowly, the tension draining from his muscles. He hurried back to the maintenance bay and opened the panel. Leora stepped out, her eyes wide. "You lied for me," she said softly. Evan gave a small smile. No one deserves to be hunted. For the first time, she looked at him without fear, though the storm outside still raged. The storm had quieted by the next morning. Leaving the desert silent and heavy under a pale sky, Evan sat in the cockpit. Scanning the horizon through the forward glass, there was no sign of the hunters, but he knew better than to relax. If they had found the station once, they could find it again down in the maintenance bay. Leora sat cross-legged on the bench, her blanket still around her. She was calmer than the night before. But her eyes still carried that alert, watchful. Look, Evan brought her a plate of reheated bread and dried fruit. This time, she accepted it, eating slowly, as though every bite was measured. "You didn't sleep." Evan said quietly. She shook her head. "They don't stop." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight he could feel. "Tell me about them," he said, hoping to understand the danger better. "They work for the syndicate." She explained, her voice low. "They buy people, or take them, if no one stops them." Her fingers tightened around the pendant hanging from her neck. "They say, I belong to them, but I don't." Evan studied her for a moment. It wasn't hard to see she had been running for a long time. He knew what the syndicate was: smugglers, slavers, and mercenaries rolled into one. They didn't care about laws, only about profit. A faint sound interrupted his thoughts. A low, deep hum. It was far away, but growing stronger. Evan's instincts kicked in. He stood, moving quickly toward the cockpit window on the horizon. 3 black shapes appeared. Moving fast over the sand, the hum became a roar as the crafts drew closer. Their dark hulls reflecting the pale light. "They're back," Evan muttered. Leora froze, her hands gripping the edge of the bench. Evan made a quick decision. "Hide," he said, motioning toward the storage panel. She moved fast this time, not wasting a second. He closed the panel and locked it into place, making it look like part of the wall. By the time he reached the ship's main door, the hunters were outside. Their heavy boots sank into the sand as they approached. One of them pounded on the hull, the metallic thud echoing through the interior. "Open up, human," the voice demanded, sharper than before. Evan opened the hatch slowly. The same 2 hunters stood there, but now there was a third, taller, broader, his armor etched with markings of rank. "You lied to us," the leader said, his visor reflecting Evan's face. Evan kept his expression neutral. "Told you the truth. I'm alone." The leader stepped inside without permission. Scanning the room with quick, precise movements, the other 2 followed, their weapons hanging but ready. One began opening storage bins. Tossing tools and parts onto the floor, Evan forced himself to stand still, every nerve tight. The leader's gaze swept toward the maintenance bay. His boots clanged against the metal floor as he walked deeper into the ship. Evan followed closely, ready to block him if needed. But the leader stopped suddenly, kneeling to pick up something small. It was another fragment of Leora's pendant, a piece she must have dropped the night before. The leader turned it over in his hand. "This is hers," he said flatly. Evan shrugged. "Found it in the market weeks ago. Junk metal." The leader didn't believe him. "You're protecting her," he said, his voice hard. Evan's jaw tightened. "If she's here, you'll hand her over or we take you instead." Before Evan could reply, the ship's proximity alarm began to blare. A sandquake warning flashed on the control panel. The hunters froze, glancing toward the open hatch. A low rumble shook the floor beneath their feet. Evan took the chance. "She's not here, and if you want to live, you'd better move," he said. The leader hesitated, clearly torn between the hunt and survival. Finally, with a sharp motion, he signaled the others to leave. They stepped outside, scanning the horizon one last time before boarding their crafts. The engines roared, kicking up waves of sand as they lifted into the sky. Evan waited until the sound faded before locking the hatch again. He walked quickly to the maintenance bay, opening the hidden panel. Leora stepped out, her face pale. "They know," she said quietly. Evan nodded. "Then we need to move before they come back with more." For a moment, she just looked at him, as if weighing something in her mind. "You could leave me?" she said softly. "You'd be safe." Evan met her gaze. "I don't leave people." "To the syndicate," he said simply. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, a small, fragile spark of trust appeared there. Outside, the desert was still again. But both of them knew the quiet wouldn't last. The engines of Evan's ship rumbled softly as he powered them up. The control panel lights flickered to life, casting a dim glow across the cockpit. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, shimmering. Under the rising suns, Evan kept his eyes on the horizon. Knowing the hunters could return at any moment, Leora stood quietly behind him. The blanket still around her shoulders. Her eyes were fixed on the view ahead, but her mind was far away. "Where will we go?" she asked finally, her voice almost a whisper. Evan didn't look back. "There's a safe zone across the frontier, far from syndicate reach." "How far?" she asked. "A few days if we're lucky," Evan replied. "Longer if trouble finds us." Her grip on the blanket tightened. She didn't need him to explain what kind of trouble he meant. With a deep hum, the ship lifted off the sand, sending waves of dust rolling outward. Evan angled the nose toward the jagged mountains in the distance. Those peaks would hide their trail from aerial scans. He set the engines to full thrust, pushing the craft into the open sky. The first few hours passed in tense silence. Evan focused on navigation while Leora sat near the back, still wary of him but no longer flinching at every sound, every now and then she would glance at him, as if trying to understand why he was risking so much for her. Finally, she spoke. "Why do you care?" Evan kept his eyes forward. "I've seen what the syndicate does to people," he said. "I've been on both sides, the side that's hunted and the side that's told to look away." His voice was steady, but there was something heavy. Beneath it, Leora's gaze lowered to the pendant in her hands. "They took my family," she said softly. "They said we were traitors to the new rulers. They sold the others, but I escaped." Her voice shook, but she didn't cry. Evan didn't push for more. He knew some stories were too raw to tell all at once. Instead, he changed course slightly, steering toward a canyon path he knew well. It was narrow, dangerous, but perfect for hiding from patrols. As they entered the canyon, shadows stretched across the ship's hull. The rock walls rose high on both sides, jagged and sharp. "This will keep us out of sight," Evan said, but even as he spoke, a warning light blinked on the console. "Incoming signal," Evan cursed under his breath. Switching the display, a small group of ships was closing in, fast raiders. Not syndicate hunters, but just as deadly. "They found us," he muttered. Leora moved closer, her eyes wide. "Who are they?" "Sky Raiders," Evan replied. "They'll strip the ship and sell whoever's inside." He pushed the throttle forward, the engines roaring as they shot deeper into the canyon. The raiders followed, their crafts weaving between the rock walls. With frightening skill, Evan took a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding a jagged outcrop. The ship rattled from the strain, but he kept going. Leora gripped the edge of the seat, holding on as the craft tilted hard to one side. Blaster fire lit up the canyon walls. Bolts of energy streaked past them, scorching the metal plating. "Hold on," Evan shouted, banking sharply to avoid another. Barrage, the sound of the raiders' engines echoed behind them like a swarm of predators. A narrow tunnel appeared ahead, barely wide enough for the ship. Evan didn't hesitate, steering straight into it. The walls were so close that sparks flew as the wings scraped rock. The raiders tried to follow, but the lead craft misjudged. The turn, slamming into the canyon wall in a burst of flame. Evan pushed harder, the tunnel twisting and dropping steeply. At the end, they shot out into a hidden valley. For a moment, everything was quiet except the hum of their own engines. But then the console blared another warning. Fuel levels dropping fast. "We'll have to land," Evan said, scanning the valley floor for a safe spot. He guided the ship toward a flat stretch of sand near a cluster of jagged ruins. The landing was rough, the ship's legs sinking slightly into the soft ground. Evan powered down the engines. The sudden silence, almost unsettling. Leora stood slowly, looking around at the strange stone structures. "They're old," she said, her voice carrying a note of awe. "Older than the Syndicate," Evan replied. Grabbing his gear, he stepped outside first, scanning the area for threats. The air was still and dry. The ruins loomed like ancient sentinels, their surfaces etched with symbols half buried in dust. Evan motioned for her to follow. "We'll rest here, but not for long." Leora walked beside him, her fingers brushing the carvings as they passed. Some of the symbols glowed faintly. Under her touch, Evan noticed but said nothing for now. They had more immediate concerns, still. He couldn't shake the feeling that this place was more than it seemed. In the distance, the faint echo of engines carried on the wind again. The journey had begun, but the danger was far from over. The sun was sinking behind the jagged cliffs, casting long shadows over the valley. Evan stood near the ship, scanning the horizon with a cautious eye. The silence here was different, not peaceful, but heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Leora sat on a fallen stone block nearby, her gaze fixed on the ancient ruins ahead. They were unlike anything Evan had seen before. Massive stone towers, half buried in sand, their surfaces carved with intricate symbols. The lines glowed faintly, pulsing like the slow beat of a heart. When the light hit them just right, the carvings looked almost alive. "What is this place?" Evan asked, moving closer. Leora didn't answer right away, her fingers brushing over one of the symbols. The glow brightened at her touch, sending a soft ripple of light through the stone. "It's old," she said finally. "Older than my people, older than the Syndicate." Evan frowned. "You've been here before?" She shook her head. "No, but I know it." Her voice was strange, almost distant, as if the valley was speaking to her. The pendant around her neck seemed to vibrate softly, catching the same glow as the carvings. Evan's instincts told him this was no ordinary ruin. He had scavenged from dozens of old worlds, but nothing had ever responded like this. "This place feels alive," he muttered. Leora nodded slowly. "It's waiting." Before he could ask what she meant, the ship's proximity alarm chirped once and went silent. Evan froze. That only happened when something large moved within the sensor range. He looked toward the far side of the valley and saw movement, shadows shifting where there should be none. "Inside," he said quickly, motioning toward the nearest structure. Leora followed, her steps quick but careful. They slipped into a wide archway carved into the stone, the air cooler inside. The walls here were covered in more glowing symbols. Their light faint but steady. This place will hide us from scanners. Leora whispered. Evan gave her a sharp look. How do you know that? She hesitated, her hands tightening on the pendant. Because I'm tied to it, she said softly. This is part of my family's legacy. Her words sank into him. Like a weight. You mean these ruins? She nodded. My ancestors were guardians of this place. Before the Syndicate destroyed our world, her voice cracked, but she kept speaking. If they knew I was here, they'd kill me before I could claim it. Evan didn't know what to say. He had been protecting her because she was in danger, but now he understood she was also the key to something much bigger. Before he could reply, a deep rumble rolled through the ground beneath their feet. It wasn't from the ruins, it was from engines. The hunters had found the valley. Evan moved to the archway. Peering outside, 3 Syndicate crafts were landing. Near the edge, their dark silhouettes sharp against the fading light. Dust swirled around them as armored figures stepped out. Weapons ready. They're too many, Evan muttered. Leora's expression hardened. They'll search every inch of this place, she said, but they can't enter the inner chamber. Not without me. Evan gave her a quick glance. And you think that's where we should be? She didn't hesitate. Yes, it's the only place we can be safe. He wasn't sure if she was right, but staying out here wasn't an option. Lead the way, he said. They moved deeper into the ruins, the air growing colder. The hallways twisted like a maze, each turn marked with more glowing carvings. Evan kept his hand near his sidearm, his ears tuned for the sound of footsteps behind them. Leora's steps quickened as they reached a massive door made of dark stone. This is it, she whispered. The pendant around her neck pulsed with light. She placed it into a circular groove in the door, and the carvings flared brighter with a deep, grinding sound. The stone split open, revealing a chamber bathed in blue light. Inside, the walls shimmered as if made from liquid crystal. In the center was a raised platform with a strange console. Leora stepped forward, her hands trembling but sure. As she touched the console, the entire chamber came alive with streams of light flowing through the air. What is this? Evan asked quietly. It's a sanctuary, Leora said, and a weapon. Before he could press her for more, the sound of boots echoed in the outer hall. The hunters were inside the ruins now, their voices cold and sharp. Evan pulled his blaster, moving toward the door. How long can you keep them out? Leora looked at him, her expression fierce for the first time since they met. As long as you protect me, she said, I can do the rest. The rumble of approaching footsteps grew louder. Evan took position by the doorway, his mind already mapping out escape routes. Whatever this place was, it had just become their only chance, and he wasn't going to let the Syndicate take it from her. The glow of the sanctuary bathed Evan's face in shifting shades of blue. He stood at the doorway, blaster ready, listening to the heavy thud of boots drawing closer. The hunters' voices echoed through the ruins, distorted by the stone walls. They were speaking in a harsh alien tongue, but their intent was clear. Search, capture, kill if needed. Leora knelt at the strange console in the center of the room, her hands moving quickly over glowing patterns. Streams of light responded to her touch, spreading across the walls like veins. They're coming fast, Evan said without looking back. Her voice was calm but urgent. Buy me a few minutes. The first shadow appeared in the doorway. A tall hunter in black armor stepped inside. Weapon raised, Evan didn't hesitate. He fired, blast striking the hunter's chest and sending him crashing into the wall. 2 more charged in. Right after, their shots lighting up the room in bursts of red energy. Evan dove behind a pillar, returning fire in short, precise bursts. The air filled with the acrid smell of burning metal and scorched stone. Leora's voice cut through the chaos. Keep them away from me. Evan shifted position. Drawing their aim away from her, one hunter tried to flank him from the side. Evan dropped to one knee, firing low and catching the attacker's leg. The alien roared, stumbling to the ground, but another shot from the doorway hit the pillar just inches from Evan's head. A deep hum began to rise from the sanctuary walls. Leora's hands glowed faintly now, her connection to the console deepening. "What are you doing?" Evan shouted over the noise, activating the shield, but it needs time to stabilize. She replied. More hunters poured into the room, their armor reflecting the blue light. Evan knew he couldn't hold them off forever. He grabbed a discarded metal shard from the floor and hurled it toward a glowing crystal on the wall. It shattered, sending a flash of energy across the room that knocked the hunters backward. The ground trembled under their feet. From the cracks in the stone, beams of light shot upward, forming a translucent dome around the chamber. Leora's voice was stronger now. "The shield is up. They can't shoot through it." Evan glanced around, noticing the hunters pounding on the glowing barrier with no effect. But the victory was short-lived. The leader of the hunters stepped forward, his armor etched with sharp, menacing patterns. He pressed a device against the barrier, and the glow flickered weakly. "They're breaking it," Leora said, her eyes wide. Evan moved closer to her, firing through the small gaps in the shield's energy field before it fully sealed. 2 more hunters fell, but the leader kept advancing. "Can you overload it?" Evan asked. Leora hesitated. "If I do, the blast will destroy the chamber, and maybe us." The leader activated another device, sending a surge of dark energy into the shield. The dome cracked like glass. Evan stepped forward, blocking Leora from view. "Run if you get the chance," he said, without looking back. She ignored him, instead touching the console in a final sequence. The room flared with blinding light, forcing the hunters to shield their eyes. Evan seized the moment, rushing forward and slamming into the leader with all his weight. They crashed to the ground, the hunter's weapons skidding across the floor. Evan grabbed it and fired point blank. The leader roared in pain, but his armor absorbed most of the hit. They struggled fiercely, the hunter's strength overwhelming. Evan was thrown backward, landing hard against the base of the platform. Leora's voice rang out sharply. "Now." The floor beneath the hunters erupted in a web of light. Energy surged upward, trapping them in glowing chains that tightened with every movement. The hunters fought to break free, but the more they resisted, the stronger the bindings became. Evan pushed himself to his feet, breathing hard. The leader glared at Leora, his voice filled with venom. "You think this will stop us? We will hunt you to the ends of the stars." Leora met his gaze, her tone steady. "Then you will keep failing," with a final command at the console. The bindings tightened until the hunters collapsed, unconscious. The hum of the sanctuary softened. Evan leaned on the platform, sweat on his brow. "You could have told me this place had a built-in defense system," he said. Leora almost smiled. "I wasn't sure it would work." Outside, the sound of the hunters' ships powering up echoed faintly through the ruins. The survivors were retreating for now, but Evan knew they'd be back. Leora stepped away from the console, the glow fading from her hands. "We don't have much time. The shield won't hold forever." Evan nodded, already moving toward the exit. They had survived the stand, but the real escape still lay ahead, and somewhere beyond the valley, the Syndicate would be waiting. The sanctuary walls were dim now, their glow fading like embers after a fire. Evan and Leora stood in the center of the chamber, the air thick with the smell of scorched metal outside. Faint vibrations shook the ground. The Syndicate was not done yet. "They're regrouping," Evan said, adjusting the strap of his blaster. Leora's eyes flickered toward the doorway, her voice low. "We won't survive another attack here." Evan nodded. "Then we move." Now, they stepped into the long hallway, their footsteps echoing against the ancient stone. The path twisted sharply, leading them back toward the outer valley as they emerged from the ruins. The sky was darkening. The twin suns had slipped behind the mountains, leaving the desert bathed. In cold light from a rising moon, their ship sat where they had left it, half covered in drifting sand. Evan could see shadows moving along the cliff edges. Syndicate scouts were watching. "They'll try to block us before we can launch," Evan muttered. Leora's grip tightened on her pendant. "Then we go through them." Before Evan could answer, the first blast came from above, striking the sand just meters from the ship. He grabbed her arm, pulling her into cover behind a jagged boulder. "We can't outshoot them all," he said. Scanning the cliffs for an opening, Leora closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was a determination he hadn't seen before. "The sanctuary is linked to me. I can still call its power, but only once." Evan studied her face. "What happens if you do?" Her voice was steady. "It will burn itself out. And I'll lose whatever connection my family had to it." He hesitated. "You sure you want to do that?" Her gaze met his. "If I don't, neither of us makes it out of here." He gave a short nod. "Do it." Leora stepped out from behind the boulder, the moonlight catching the silver in her hair. Her pendant began to glow, brighter and brighter, until it was almost blinding. A low hum rose from the ground, growing into a deep vibration that rattled the stones around them. From the heart of the ruins, beams of light shot upward into the night sky. The Syndicate scouts froze, their weapons lowering in shock. The beams split, arcing toward the cliffs like living streams of lightning. They struck with a sound like tearing metal, sending Syndicate fighters scrambling for cover. Evan pulled Leora back toward the ship as the cliffs shook under the impact. The glow around her was fading fast. By the time they reached the ramp, she was swaying on her feet. He caught her before she could fall, guiding her inside. The ship's engines roared to life. Evan pushed the throttle forward, lifting them off the sand just as the Syndicate ships tried to regroup. Blaster fire streaked past, but he weaved through it. Skimming low over the dunes, the valley fell away behind them, shrinking into the endless desert. In the cockpit, Leora slumped in the co-pilot's seat, her breathing slow but steady. "You all right?" Evan asked, glancing at her. She nodded faintly. "It's gone. The connection. But we're alive." He gave a small smile. "That's all that matters right now." The night sky stretched before them, stars glittering like scattered diamonds. Evan set a course toward the safe zone, a hidden outpost. Far beyond Syndicate reach, the hum of the engines was the only sound for a while. Then Leora spoke quietly. "When you found me, I thought it was the end." He looked at her. "And now?" Her gaze met his, steady despite her exhaustion. "Now I think it's the beginning," she said. "You were my last hope. And you chose me." Evan's hands tightened on the controls. He didn't often think of himself as a savior. He was just a man trying to survive, but in this moment, he realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about keeping her alive anymore. It was about giving her a life worth living. The stars ahead seemed brighter somehow. The Syndicate would still be out there, hunting, but for now, they had escaped, and as long as they kept moving, there was a chance for something better. Evan glanced at her once more. "Always," he said quietly. Answering the unspoken promise between them, the ship soared higher into the night, leaving the Valley of Shadows behind, and somewhere in the darkness, hope traveled with them.